The free agent options for the Royals are getting smaller and smaller. Should it concern Royals fans? We'll talk about it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That is at JOHNYJ_15. And of course, you can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, we're on Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Now, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Once again, a little bit of a unorthodox type of week for us. Usually in this 3-episode-a-week span that we're doing until about mid-February, the plan is to go Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But with this being Christmas week, a little bit of a change up there. I was kind of already planning on it being a little bit of a change up, but then I came down with the flu on Sunday, I think it was. Went and tried to get some stuff done on Monday, but by Tuesday, when I was planning to do an episode for Christmas Eve, I basically had no voice. And I thought, instead of trying to force it when really no news has happened yet and put out a podcast where my voice sounds terrible, thought I might just wait till Thursday, but not to worry. We're still going to bring you 3 episodes this week. We'll have one today. We'll have a Mailbag Friday tomorrow, probably in the morning/early afternoon time. And then we're going to get one done on Saturday afternoon as well. So still will reach that 3-episode-a-week threshold. And then next week, assuming I don't come down with anything else, we'll be back to Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, because that will be the pretty stable plan we have until we bump back up to 5 episodes a week right before spring training. But for today's show, we are going to be talking about some of the guys that came off the board in free agency. Whether the Royals were interested or not, that we're just simply going to be pointing out that now those guys are no longer available, right? Jock Peterson, he goes to Texas. I thought it would have been a nice fit for the Royals if they did want a DH and a DH only, which I just don't get that vibe from Kansas City, that they want to bring in somebody who can't play the field. That's kind of where I'm at, too, with Anthony Santander, though he is still out there. And again, I'm trying to take into account what J.J. Picollo has said about wanting to acquire that middle-of-the-order bat through trade. So should we be concerned that these guys that are flying off the list now are free agent names, right? Because really the trade market never really closes, right? It's not like a guy gets traded for and then now all of a sudden nobody's going to be making trades anymore. With free agency, I do think some of those names going off the list put the Royals in more of a time crunch now. Because if you don't like the options or you're not meeting the asking price of the team you're trying to trade for, well, you're going to have to pivot to free agency. And the last thing you want to happen is to either force a trade where you had to go well above what you were willing to offer to get that middle of the order bat because there's no other names out there in free agency. Or I guess worst case scenario would be not even being able to make a trade, and then you're left with nothing after trying to go out there and get a middle of the order bat. I don't see that happening. I think the Royals are still going to go out there and get that middle of the order bat. But we have to simply acknowledge that, there are going to be some names that start signing here pretty soon. I mean, Jock Peterson going with Texas. And by the way, I think Texas and Chris Young, the former Royal, have had a great offseason. They clearly were very disappointed after the season they put in after winning the World Series. So they're trying to revamp that offense once again. Nate Lowe gets traded to Washington. I never thought that he would be somebody that would be an option for the Royals. He was traded for a reliever who, by the way, was a former Royals draft pick in 2017. Great baseball savant page if you're into that. But you're kind of seeing that the market is a little bit unpredictable. You don't really know what some guys are going for. Some guys you think might have a higher asking price end up only taking one player in return. I think some of the trades that the Yankees were able to pull off surprised a little bit of us about what all they had to give up to get Devin Williams, what they had to give up to go out there. Who was the other guy they went and acquired? I'm already blanking. Oh, Cody Bellinger, of course. And then they also signed Paul Goldschmidt. So some of those names I think were certainly candidates for the Royals to go out there and get. They weren't perfect fits, though. And that, I think, needs to be acknowledged as well. But I am starting to wonder if the Royals are not able to strike a trade deal, that they start getting aggressive in free agency. Because now I think the only name that makes sense if they are to sign somebody in free agency for the middle of the order bat would be Jurickson Profar. And I think Jurickson Profar would fit just fine in Kansas City. I think his numbers would translate pretty well. He's a switch hitter, which obviously you like. He's a corner outfielder, which fits a position of need right now. And I think he can hit at the top of the lineup. I think he can hit in the middle of the order. And I think he would be searching for a 3-year deal. And I don't think he'd be completely out of the price range. At the same time, with him not striking a deal right now, maybe he is asking for a lot more than teams are willing to give him, even teams like the Padres who feel like the front runner to bring him back. But that's just where I think, JJ Picollo and everybody working in the front office, Scott Sharp, Brian Bridges, they can certainly take their time and be patient with finding their perfect middle of the order bat. But once you get past December and you get into January, now the clock really starts. To me, it does. Like if you're pretty quiet through December, okay, I can hear you out a little bit. Maybe the market's not quite right. Maybe the price is too high. Let's wait it out a little bit longer. You get to January, I'm starting the clock. Okay, and if you get to the end of January and the calendar turns over to February, now I'm starting to get a little bit restless if no move has been made. Because I expect in this time from December 26th to January 28th, 29th, there's going to be some big names that fly off the board, right? There's going to be some names that start signing with bigger markets. I know the American League Central has still been pretty quiet out there, so that should put you in more of a calmer state of mind if you're a Royals fan. It's not like the Royals have been the only team that have been pretty quiet over the last month or so. But I do like how now some of these names are signing. Therefore, it can turn up the heat a little bit. Because I would like to say that the market has been pretty consistent. Like I thought after Juan Soto signed, there was going to be a trickle-down effect where guys would start signing just one after the other. And really, during the winter meetings, once the big fish was out of the pond, now everybody else could start getting caught. And we kind of saw that. There was a little bit of heat on the stove, but then it cooled off again. And then there was a week or a couple days stretch where some moves were made. You thought things were going to heat back up again, and then they cooled off. And now we're kind of in this dead zone. And usually between Christmas and New Year's Eve, there's a pretty big dead zone there. And then January, things can start to heat up once again. And moves will be made in February as well. But I just think I would feel far more comfortable if the Royals had their key pieces in place, which really, to me, there's one more key piece they need to address, which is that middle of the order bat. If they want to wait to sign that swing starter and role player in February, be my guest. I do not care when those players are signed because there's no game changer out there that you need to get right now because they're not going to be available, right? A super utility role player is going to be available in October and is going to be available in February. It's just a matter of getting them at a cheap price. Same thing for a swing starter, right? And we'll be talking about a swing starter here in our second segment. But those type of moves, they can wait until February, which is why I'm still not hitting the panic button yet that some of these names are coming off the board and the Royals are not even linked to those guys. Because I still think they're trying to address it through trade. And maybe they're waiting for some of those prices to come down. I'd imagine that's the goal. But if those prices don't come down in January, maybe you do see if some of the prices are coming down in free agency to the guys maybe you were once interested in. I'd be curious to know if the Royals will turn to free agency if it's not going to be working out through the trade route. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, Michael Lorenzen certainly can be an option for a swing starter in Kansas City, but he wants to be a two-way player again. I thought this was fascinating. And should the Royals still be interested if he wants to be a two-way player? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today in Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened for me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings, and it brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you wanted to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users. It has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. This name has certainly been brought up more than a few times when it comes to free agent spending, looking at the starting pitching market, and just from a familiarity standpoint, Royals fans really liked Michael Lorenzen and what he was able to do for Kansas City in 2024. But now it's going to be a little bit more complicated in bringing him back for the 2025 season, mainly because of what Michael Lorenzen is hoping to do this upcoming year. And for those that were unfamiliar with Michael Lorenzen prior to him coming to Kansas City, he was at one point in time a outfielder / pitcher. I don't really want to call him a two-way player because I think the only two-way guy out there I'll give that title to is Shohei Ohtani. But Michael Lorenzen could hit, he could play the outfield a little bit, and he could pitch. I mean, you've seen how the guy is built. He's athletic enough, he's strong enough to do both. I wouldn't say do it well or do it even really that average, but clearly he still would like to do that. And this was an article done by Ken Rosenthal, and I'd be curious to see the type of market that he gets, and this brings the Royals into consideration here. Would they be willing to give Michael Lorenzen a contract if it meant that he was going to be a two-way player? And not starting, of course, but there could be days where Michael Lorenzen's coming out of the bullpen, and maybe there's an afternoon game where Michael Lorenzen's your starting right fielder. And I know that he's probably working out this offseason to try to better his offensive skill. Maybe he thinks it'll help his market a little bit more to be a two-way player. It might just come down to what teams are willing to risk, and would they be willing to give up a positional spot even for one game a week to a guy that hasn't really been a hitter now for a few years since he was in Cincinnati. I mean, he revived his career a little bit in Detroit, made the All-Star game, was traded over to Philadelphia in their postseason run, went to Texas, had somewhat of a fine first half, was dealt to Kansas City, was really good before he got hurt. And now he's maybe thinking, I don't want a one-year deal. I'd like to have a 2-year deal and try it out as a two-way player. And that to me screams a move that a tanking team would do. And I don't know if there's really a tanking team out there. And I mean that because, there's no reason to tank anymore. There are going to be teams that are, not going to be spending money and just want to count on their guys that are not making a lot of money and their homegrown talent. But it makes no sense to tank anymore because you're not guaranteed a top pick. But you look at teams like the White Sox and the Rockies, like they're just not going to be good in 2025. And that feels like a move those teams would make to maybe generate some interest at the trade deadline. If Michael Lorenzen does succeed a little bit as a two-way player, maybe a contending team would go, wow, you can have him off the bench as a power hitter, come in and face a lefty because he's a right-handed hitter, and he can come out of the bullpen or he can spot start for us. He's got that flexibility. But I think for a contending team or a team that's trying to build off a postseason run like the Royals, it should give you some pause. And here's why. Michael Lorenzen was really good for the Royals in 2024, but it was for a short time because he had that hamstring injury. He tried to work his way back. And then I think that first outing back, he kind of re-aggravated something. Then he appeared again in the postseason. But it was a little bit of a touch and go thing. Like there was, once he got hurt in Cleveland with that hamstring injury, he never really was the same. And I think that's something you would circle because the Royals are going to be looking for a swing starter they can count on. They need depth. And when you're looking for a number 6 starter, you don't want to be concerned with, well, they could get hurt, even on days when they're not pitching, right? Injuries happen in baseball. That's a part of the game. But when you're looking for a spot starter, a number 6 starter, if somebody goes down or somebody's got the flu like I did the night before a start, you need somebody to fill in, you want to be able to count on this guy every single day, every single month, every single season. That's what your goal would be for your number 6 starter. And you know what you're going to get from him. Michael Lorenzen, the pitcher, is somebody that I would love to have as the swing starter. I think he'd be great in a bullpen role. I think he'd be great starting games for the Royals. But if he was a two-way player, I think that's where it becomes a little bit more iffy. Because if he's the Michael Lorenzen two-way player, well, let's imagine a scenario in which he plays right field on a Sunday afternoon game and he hurts that hamstring. And now he's not able to be that number 6 starter. And you're going to have to turn to somebody else, maybe somebody who's not ready, or maybe you're having to move somebody who was in a defined role in the bullpen to now a long relief role so he can be the spot starter, or you'll have to stretch somebody out. Those things all get a little bit more complicated. And that's why I think this could rule out the Royals. It also could be something where, Michael Lorenzen is saying, I'd like to do it. Because when I was skimming this article a little bit, it didn't seem like he was saying, I'm going to be a two-way player and that's all it's going to be. I'm not signing somewhere if they're not going to give me a chance. I think he's wanting to do that idea in the same way that, Jack Caglione signed with the Royals because he said they're going to allow me the opportunity to do both. And maybe it's a scenario where, hey, I could get an opportunity, but it's once every 3 weeks. That's a different story, right? If you're going to sign a guy and it's, well, I'd like to play the field this year, but I also understand this is the big leagues and there are guys that play the position better than me, are better hitters than me, and they're going to have starts over me because this is a business about winning. It's not about feel-good stories. It's not about having fun all the time. And I would have a role in the bullpen, or I'd have a role in the rotation. And that's what I think the Royals will be navigating when it comes to that, because I'm sure they would love to bring Michael Lorenzen back. But with the way he got hurt in 2024, covering first base, right, using that athleticism a little bit, I mean, what if that happens chasing down a fly ball in the outfield? Or what if it happens running to first base? Or stretching a single into a double? Or getting hit by a pitch up at the plate? Like, that would just be a disastrous thing when you're trying to keep that spot starter, that swing guy, kind of in a box, right? That if you need him, we're going to shatter that glass and we're going to put him into the rotation. And we feel good about what that guy can do. And that's something they need to be patient and careful with when finding that 6th starter. They can give you that value in the bullpen. They can be your long relief guy. They can be a 1-inning guy. But if somebody's missing a start or they're missing multiple starts, you can count on that guy. You think about a doomsday scenario where you have a guy on the mound that gets hurt in a start and Michael Lorenzen's playing the outfield and he gets hurt in that game. Well, now you're down 2 starters and you're going to have to turn to somebody else, whether it be in AAA Omaha or be somebody in the bullpen. And I think there are options out there that can be swing starters. It's not just Michael Lorenzen, but I do find that fascinating that he is somebody that would entertain being a two-way player again. It'd be fun to watch for sure, but for what the Royals need out there, don't think it's going to be a two-way player. I think they need a guy who's just a pitcher and can be that swing starter for them in 2025. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about Junior Fernandez, a guy the Royals gave a minor league deal to and a spring training invite. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our title sponsor today in FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. You can love betting on which players will score a touchdown or how many points each team will score. It is absolutely thrilling. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And for my pick, I'm going to look to that Buffalo and Jets game. I think Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams have a good connection going right now. I just watched that Netflix thing on him the other day. I thought it was actually pretty good. But I'm going to go with Davante Adams here. I'll take the over on receiving yards for him in this game against the Buffalo Bills. Last thing we're going to talk about today is about a move that the Royals made not too long ago. It was the signing of Junior Fernandez, a flame-throwing right-hander that hasn't pitched in the big leagues now, coming up on 3 years. He's only 27 years old, so there's something to work with there. But once again, this is a minor league deal where you kind of feel like there's something to like. Like, there's clearly something that the Royals are intrigued by when it comes to a guy like this. It's not that it's going to work out or anything like that. But when you have a 27-year-old that throws this hard, you feel like there's a chance you could unlock something. There's something you could spark, even though it's never worked in his big league career. Junior Fernandez has never been a consistent big league pitcher. He throws 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's got no control. It doesn't have great spin rate. By all accounts, this has no future value to it. This move could be something we never talk about again. You can see this on the bottom line of the segment. Who is Junior Fernandez? That may be a question you're asking a few months from now at spring training, and then you never hear the guy's name again. It's very possible at that. And the first thing I thought of when this deal happened was Dan Altavilla. I thought that Dan Altavilla, when he was signed, was a move where he throws really hard. He's been working in the winter leagues. For Junior Fernandez, he was actually pitching in Japan for Chibalote, actually. Then he had an injury, which sidelined him the rest of the year. So he's been battling injuries. That happens sometimes with the hard throwers. He's also been pitching now in, I think, the Dominican Winter League, if I'm not mistaken. Hasn't pitched very well, but the Royals are going to bank on that fastball looking good in spring training, maybe develop another pitch or two, and who knows? That's bullpen depth. Minor league deals, I love. That might be my broken record type thing I say on this podcast over and over again is I love minor league deals. There's no downside to them. If they don't work out, it costs you nothing. If they do work out, you look like a genius. And with Junior Fernandez, I liken it to the Dan Altavilla deal because both these guys hadn't pitched in the big leagues in a while. The difference was Dan Altavilla did have a stint in his big league career where he was effective. He was good for Seattle. I think he had a moment with the Padres where he was pretty effective, and then he just couldn't stay healthy. With Junior Fernandez, he never really put it together with the Cardinals. I think he had time in Pittsburgh. He was in the minor league level with Toronto's system as well in 2023, but that was the last time he was affiliated with Major League Baseball. So last year, he's over in Japan trying to make his way back, and now he's going to have a chance in spring training, if he stays healthy, to compete for a spot somewhere in Kansas City's system. But I do think you can always be intrigued by a guy that throws anywhere from 98 to 100, which that's the good sign. If we had gotten reports that the Royals signed Junior Fernandez and he's throwing 94, 95, I think I'd go, well, there's really no point now. I'm not going to be too intrigued by that, considering the guy doesn't have a great track record in the big leagues. He hasn't pitched in the big leagues in 3 years, and he's sitting mid-90s. Like, unless the spin rate's out of control or he's developed a new pitch, I'm not too excited by a deal like this. But the fact he throws nearly 100, at times over 100, that's something you can work with a little bit. It may not be perfect, but sometimes you throw a dart at a dartboard in a pitch black room and it works out for you. The Royals did that with Sam Long. Sam Long was coming off a bad year in Oakland, but he was good at one point for the Giants in San Francisco. The Royals banked on him being the Giants version over the Oakland version. and it worked out for them. He ended up being one of their main staples in the bullpen. He was good enough in the postseason, and they'll have him back this coming year. The difference in some of those guys, those minor league deal guys, is that they had a good year or maybe multiple good years, and then they reignited something, or they found or rediscovered something in themselves that allowed them to succeed again. If Junior Fernandez succeeds, and maybe he does pitch in Kansas City at some point, that would be the first time in his career. There was one year he put together, I pulled it up earlier, where I think he had a sub-3 ERA, but the numbers were a little bit iffy to me. I think it was like a 2.8 something ERA, but the walk rate was not good. Yeah, so it was in 2022, his last year in the bigs, actually. He had thrown in 16 games, 18 and 2/3 innings pitched. He had a 2.41 ERA, but he had a 1.6 whip, and he was walking just under 6 guys per 9 and striking out under 7 guys per 9. So not even a big strikeout, big walk guy. You're talking about somebody who couldn't find the strike zone and was just hoping guys would put it in play. That's not a good number to me. I don't think that's something that's really worth taking a chance on back then. But now, maybe there's something that the scouts saw. The Royals were known to do this last offseason. There were a handful of guys they gave a minor league deal to. And I think every single one of them got to Kansas City at some point. Tyler Duffy did. Dan Altavilla did. Sam Long did. I think the one guy that didn't was Mike Brosseau, but that was a middle infielder. So 3 of those guys, all pitchers, did get a crack at Kansas City at some point. So if Junior Fernandez comes to spring training and you see that fastball light up the radar gun and he's developed some secondary pitch, who knows? That's somebody you could stash down in AAA Omaha. Somebody gets banged up and he's pitching well for the Storm Chasers. He gets a chance up there. That's the beauty of these minor league deals, is they show out well in spring training. Hey, just keep that in mind. Stash them away in AAA, and maybe you have your shot at them making an impact in your bullpen at some point. It's an absolute long shot, especially for a guy like him. And I promise you, I'm not trying to put all the stock into the world on Junior Fernandez. I'm just trying to bring you some information on him. I mean, he's 27 years old, and he hasn't pitched in the big leagues in 3 years. So he broke into the league pretty young. He hasn't pitched there in a long time, but he's still throwing hard. I will always take a chance on somebody who throws somewhat hard and roll the dice a little bit. I think that's something that you can certainly look at, and I think it's something exciting. So maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. It's a minor league deal, and that's something you can certainly watch in spring training. That's something you can keep your tabs on, and hope to get some information out of. Hope to get some good insight about when it comes to Junior Fernandez. That'll do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. We want to thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB, as baseball guru Sully brings you a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to have a Mailbag Friday, but until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.